Picking up here. All right, we're good. Okay. All right. Um, oh good. It doesn't show the Zoom controls. I will say, is there a way to hide the Zoom controls for myself? So it's like so distracting. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Okay, cool. Hey everyone. Welcome. I honestly feel a little bit guilty or bad about the title that I initially sent to Jeff because I've been talking to a lot of people about how long they've been looking. And people, it's usually not in terms of days how long people are looking for something, but in terms of months, and in some cases years. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit as well. But a little bit of a, not really a spoiler, but something I'm really going to talk about today is on how to build reputation and how to build relationships. Because I think those are two very critical things that I think we can build and grow over time that really makes it so finding something new can go a lot, go well and go better than I think it went when I initially started out. Um, there's also something I want to share that Warren Buffett's pretty cool, and he just had a shareholder meeting. I think it was his last one. I think he's retiring, and he said, "I think it's a real mistake in communication or persuasion to lecture a bunch of people when you've just won the game." And there's a different context for this, but I think it's like kind of a good truism. It's like it's a little bit weird to say to take things from a perspective of like, oh, I just sold my company. Here's how you grow a company that gets bought, or I just got hired. Here's how you just go and get hired. And I want to acknowledge that it's one thing to say like, hey, I've done really well. Here's how you can do well too. And it doesn't really necessarily work that way because we're all different and our circumstances are all unique. It doesn't play out like that. But with that said, um, and just for quick context here, I did post, and this is what actually did get me the opportunity that I ended up taking. I posted on X, and I actually was really excited about a role I had already been referred to. And right around the same, I can't remember if I had found out they were also laying people off right as I applied, which is also a very common thing right now. But I just posted on X just to say, hey, I'm looking. Um, I hope this opportunity works out. But FYI, I am open to new things. And then 3 weeks later, had an update. And it was that I had signed an offer, and this was 20 days. I posted this 3 weeks later, but it was 20 days the day before this that I accepted the offer. So I had this happen very quickly, and it was around this time that I'm like, wow, this happened really fast. Why did this happen really fast? And is there anything reproducible from my experience? Or is there anything to be gleaned from it that it is worth sharing, not just, hey, I did it. So I want to this is I'm not here to come up here and flex so that like I got this so quick and it's because I know these people and I know these things and my resume is so good. It wasn't that. I don't think it was that. And I want to talk about the things that I think are very reproducible. And something I'll just say right out of the gate is the fact that you're here and you're listening and that you're present or online is like one of the biggest things right there. The fact that you're present, that you're showing up and you're here talking to other people is frankly, I think the single greatest thing you could be doing, and you're doing it. And I want to acknowledge that. With that said, it's my next slide. I'll kind of leave it on. I'll kind of go back to here because I want to back up after saying why like I found success recently and share that it didn't start that way for me. And if I go back to early in my career, I think I probably failed longer than anyone else that I've talked to. I committed to being a professional software developer in the year 2000. I was graduating high school and I was torn between being an English major or a math major. Yes, that's a weird decision to be making. And I had sort of like shirked the idea of being a software developer because at the time the it was frankly very stereotypical that as a software developer you work in a cubicle people and yes you get to work on code but often solving potentially very boring problems, which does happen. But I just wasn't that attracted to it until I realized, wait, I really do love doing this. I really enjoy it very much. Something I had done as a hobby as a kid throughout my childhood, even in high school. I'd written code for fun. And I realized, wait, I could get paid for this. And here I am. I don't know what I want to do. Why don't I go down this path? So I committed to that in really the summer of 2000. Um, and at the time, the way to do it was to go to college and get a university degree. That was the sort of the one true path. Not everybody did that, but it was the highly recommended. Nothing really competes with that. Being self-led or self-taught or going to boot camp wasn't as prevalent. Though I was to a large degree self-taught at that point. I wasn't ready to be employed professionally. So I went to university and I worked part-time while doing this. So I had to pay my way through school. I had to move out of my own home a year into college and figure that out. So it took me a while to go through all the courses. And I kept trying to break into tech, get an IT job. And in 2004, I got an IT help desk job. I did the going into help desk to get into IT. And it actually worked pretty decently. I met another business owner that was a client of our company's who got me a summer internship in 2005. And then somebody else who was another like business, either a customer or business relationship with the president of our company. He said, "Hey, I'm hiring for a part-time web developer. Would you like to do that?" And I got to do that in late 2006. And up to that point, all I had done was stuff in my free time, which included building a website for my local semi-pro roller hockey team. So I built one website and I went and I talked to this business owner, this small company, and I got to work part-time building things in PHP and HTML and CSS and JavaScript and pure JavaScript and pure CSS. They didn't have any libraries at the time. I brought in YUI pretty soon after that. But I started there part-time, and after a few months, I got my first full-time job in 2007. So 7 years. It took me 7 years, if I count from when I committed to becoming a professional software developer, to getting to be paid to write code full-time. And there's more to those 7 years of like what I did and what I tried and how I failed. I was trying to find something this whole time, and it took me 7 years. And the thing I did find, it didn't really pay a salary. It paid a stipend, really. I made $500 a week as a 1099, which when I was working 60 to 80 hours a week, I was making less than minimum wage. For me, I'd made it. Like I got paid to code. And that job was terrible, but I got that first role. And very fortunately, after that, they stopped making enough money, or they didn't make enough money to keep everybody on. And after several months, I ended up going back to that part-time job, and they made it a full-time role. I did that for a year or so, and then I burned out without realizing it. And I ended up at an agency after that. And I worked there for 2 years. And something that was interesting about that first 4 years of my career, 2007 to 2011, was I finished in 2011. Well, I got fired when I couldn't show up to work because I was so sick I needed to be in the hospital. And not great jobs, not great places. And I remember looking at my peers, people who went to college about the same time as me, and they were all so far ahead of me. They were all mid-level. Some of them were senior developers by now. And I knew that I was still a very junior engineer. And I'd been working for 4 years full time, and I didn't have any mentorship. So that was when I got my first, I would say, real job where I worked on a real team, where I actually had people supporting me. And I was at an insurance company. I lived in Connecticut. There wasn't as many opportunities as there was in a tech city like Denver. And in a sense, I said it took me 7 years to find full-time employment, but it really took me 11 years to find a job where I had mentorship, where I had support, where we wrote tests and like actually did things in a mature way. And it took me a long time to get to that point. And there's something else I want us to mention from that sort of era, which was in 2010. I remember being in a meeting at that agency, and there was about 8 of us around a room, and around a table, and we were talking about a project. It was like our biggest project to date. So we're actually having a meeting about it, which was not something we had done for the first 2 years I was there. And I remember I had real concerns and questions about the timeline, and I had requirements to gather. Like I was writing a lot of the back end code, and there was a lot of important things I needed to bring up. And I really struggled to even just say, "Hey, what about this?" And I ended up being really quiet in that meeting because it was there was 8 people I knew, but it was hard for me to talk to other people. So there's something here about I had a lot of social anxiety. Going to a cash register to check out or ordering a restaurant was really hard. I was coming from a place where um, speaking to other people was really difficult in any setting. And even amongst people who had been coworkers with for a year now, or a year or 2 years at this point, um, was terribly difficult for me. And I knew that that was going to hurt me in my career. So I want to share just a little bit of that because I speak at conferences now, and being able to communicate technically at that time was, forget talking in terms of tech. I just talking to people was hard, and it's a skill to be able to talk technically, like in an interview or with a team, and something that hopefully we all get to all do now. But that was where I was coming from at that time, and the thing I ended up reaching for at the time, knowing that this would hurt me in my career, knowing this would not only hurt me as a human being, being able to communicate and interact with other humans. I had a was I engaged? I got married around the time that time, and I thought this is going to affect my family. If I cannot communicate at work, this is going to inhibit what I'm able to do as a professional. It's going to inhibit my income, and definitely when things go beyond myself, it's highly motivating. So I had actually tried for about 14 years up to this point, since I was a kid, since I went into high school essentially, to overcome this. And everything I had tried had essentially failed because here I was at work and I was struggling. So I decided to go further than I had ever gone. I decided to embrace public speaking. I decided to go after that and to immerse myself in speaking at meetups. And I think I spoke at a meetup with 5 people at first. And that was so terrifying and so hard. But the people there were wonderful. I think my wife was one of them, by the way. And everyone there was so supportive. And then I did it again and gave another talk. I think I talked about Google Maps, and I talked about Git, and I talked about Chrome extensions. This is back in 2010, 2011, 2012. I gave like one talk each year. And it was so hard, but I did it, and it was already helping me. And then I continued with that into 2013. And 2013 was where things started to grow for me in a way that um, that I think built from there. And that's when I didn't have a JavaScript meetup in my city, Hartford, or around the area. So I started Hartford JS. And I had everybody from my team come and speak. And I think I just emceed it and introduced everybody. And I, of course, spoke at some subsequent meetups, and I just started speaking, and I was organizing at these events. And then I went to a conference in Florida, and I met some people from Austin and Seattle and Denver. And I'm like, wow, there's a lot of like really cool tech cities. I've always been in Hartford. What if we went and moved out to one of those places? So somebody I met at a conference, this is sort of my first like hiring story that ties into what I'm saying here. I went to JSConf US 2013, and there was people I just went and asked questions. And one of the things I was trying to figure out at the time was, how do you test UI? Because I was really struggling to find good examples. And it was something that testing was frankly something I just didn't get. Like, it didn't make sense to me. What do you test? What do you not test? How do you go about testing it? What makes a good test? I didn't know any of that. So I went to the conference, just to ask people like, hey, how do you do this? And there was one person that had really good answers for me. And he worked at this company called Rally Software out of Boulder. And I ended up um, reaching out to him a couple of months later and applying to his company and got the interview. I actually failed the interview. Like, somebody said, I don't think he knows JavaScript. But because he did the lunch interview, and actually somebody else referred me because I had their email. He spoke up and said, I actually talked to him for like 8 hours at a conference, and we talked a lot about JavaScript, and he runs a meetup, and I think you're wrong. Try again. And they called me back for the second day. And I think because I got off the super stressful like whiteboarding and live coding bit, and I went back to the hotel, I was like, oh, why didn't I do it this way? The next day I nailed it. Like, I knew what to do. I knew to use a different data structure, and I did fine. And I got the job and moved out to Colorado. And I basically got that job because I just talked to somebody at a meetup or a conference, and they knew what I was talking about. And that has happened again and again for me, and it's happened for other people that I've talked to. So like these random conversations with people we meet, like Nico, or we ended up working together for a short time in a company because he came up to me up after a meetup, and we just, it's like, hey, what's your name? What do you do? And I can't remember how that went, but I remember I was like, hey, we're hiring. And Jason comes and ends up working with us. And like that happens a lot. Um, what else do I want to say? I'm gonna switch over my slides. I don't want to stay in storytelling land forever. I'll go back to that. This is a good one. So I remember just not knowing how to talk to people, or like, what do I ask about? Where do you work? What do you do? All that stuff. There's actually a design to a couple of the ways one of the ways I framed one of these questions is the first one. And I think there's a lot of people who aren't working right now, or they're laid off, or they've been looking for a while. And the way I would like to frame it is not where do you work or what do you do, because it might be a tough thing to answer, is where are you in your career? I think there's also a very broad way to be asking that too. It's not necessarily like, I don't even, it might not even, you might have a job, you might not even answer where you work. You might say, oh, well, I'm a senior engineer. I'm trying to become a lead or something like that. Or I'm a mid-level. I'm trying to figure out how to become a senior. Or I'm looking for a job, or I'm looking for my first job. You can answer it any way you want. And I think that's a good way to pose that is where are you in your career? And stepping back from these specific questions, when what I figured out going to meetups and conferences was that I'm naturally curious about who every single person, every single one of you. I'm curious who you are, because I know there's something I can learn from every single one of you, and there's some gift that you can give me, and hopefully vice versa. And so I realized like I'm curious about people naturally, so I just started asking people questions. And I noticed that other people did that. Other people I would get to know also did the same thing, is just ask questions. And it's a funny strategy because um, it's like there's this counterintuitive aspect of getting to know people where if you're looking for a job and you want them to basically know who you are so they know how to help you, you think it's talking about yourself. But like that is the thing that I learned to just completely throw out the window, like just not talk about myself unless I'm giving a talk and just ask people questions. Where are you in your career? What are you learning right now? Like, oh, how did you hear about this meetup? Things like that. Um, Asking questions is like just a magic strategy to get to know anybody. And there's another point that really goes along with this, which I may have lost it. Sorry, it's basically um, they say there's this line about like it's about who you know, and I don't believe in that. I think the way I think about it is it's not what is it? It's not who you know, it's what people know you for. And that's something I realized people would say, hey, I'm looking for a role. And then I realized I didn't know how to help them because they're just looking for a role. So I could send them everything I see, but there's actually a lot that I see, a lot of hiring happening right now. And then somebody else comes along and they say, hey, I'm looking to work on a design system again. And they're specific about it. And then all of a sudden, wait, I know a bunch of design system teams, and I know that a friend of mine at this company just posted that they're hiring. And I found that I tried this for myself when I started looking. I didn't just say, hey, I'm on the market. I said, hey, I'd like to work in design systems, developer experience, or developer tooling. And I basically made a wish list. And there's more on my wish list, but I just started with like, what's the top three things that I've done or I want to do more of? And let me just throw that out there. And what ended up happening was somebody who I had met at meetups um, actually told somebody else who I also knew at meetups, hey, Will's on the market. And the other person said, oh, Will, he does talks and stuff like that. What is he looking for? And it's like said what I was looking for, developer experience. She ended up introducing me to a team that was hiring. It wasn't doing design systems. You could say they're doing developer tooling, but that wasn't their focus. But they were hiring for a developer relations engineer that could own the developer experience for their dev portal. And so they were able to key in on like one of those three things on my wish list. Who did they know? Well, one of their students that went to Galvanize that they taught about 10 years ago was hiring for that. So I've seen this a bunch where people post like, hey, I'm just on the market, but they don't people are afraid to throw out exactly what they're looking for. So a big part of it, I think, or something I definitely want to encourage more people to do is think about what your wish list is and communicate that. And it's not that everything on your wish list has to be met, but just give something we're pattern matching machines. We pattern match, you know, uh, Lars is into NBA playoffs right now. And I, just having that is better to go on than like Lars is into sports. And the more you have, the more you can throw out there of what you're looking for. And it doesn't have to necessarily be this technical stuff. You could be, I want to work at a startup. I want to work on a really small team, or I want to work on a place that has really good values where people are treated well and they're not just like thrown off because they're over headcount or they want to restructure and move into AI or whatever they're saying these days. Anything you could throw out there, it helps people realize that, oh, I don't know, just know that that Nico is looking. I know that Nico is after these things. And when I see the next day somebody post about that, oh, Nico, this thing, Nico, right? This thing, Jason, and so forth. So I sort of recognize that that was happening for me where I know a lot of people, I know a lot of places are hiring, I know a lot of people looking, and I can never make that connection. But as soon as I started seeing people be more specific, I started to make that connection. I started to say, oh, I know a person at this company. Let me introduce you. I can't remember exactly who. I know I made a couple introductions the last month because I knew somebody was looking to work in something and I knew somebody in that same space. I know somebody that was I know somebody was looking to be a scrum master in what was it? In biotech. Super specific, wildly specific, biotech. And I've never worked in biotech, but I play video games every Tuesday night with the same group of guys. And one of those persons he's more of a researcher. He works in biotech. And I was able to say, hey, Charles, like, would you be willing to talk to so and so? It's funny how that can work. The other thing about like what you're known for is I think that is the biggest thing of what you're known for. And there's definitely more you can do. There's something I'll actually show you. There's one thing I was intentional about, which was my personal site. And this is just a plain text website. And I just put things I've done in the past. And it leads off with talking about developer experience and developer tools. There's definitely a theme here. But I realized that this was helpful for me when I see other people have this. I'll meet so and so and I'll have their LinkedIn and then they have a website. I go to their website, I find out that, oh, they have a Blue Sky. So now I can follow them on Blue Sky. Or when I see on their website that that they're into a certain thing. I might have another example here. The Zoom controls are getting in my way. I don't have it. It's okay. There's somebody I was just looking at today. His name is Jeremy. Jesus, his last name is slipping me. I met him in Stockholm at a conference. He has a CSS book, and I see that on his website. Having a website or just anything that says like, here's some things I've done is really great. And where's it going? I've essentially this is one way I would say I've kind of thrown up what am I known for? There's a lot of things around meetups. There's a lot of things about conferences. There's a lot of things about dev tools. It's super like thrown together and like it feels random. But like I've been thoughtful about what am I actually interested in and how do I communicate that to people? And of course, yeah, when I'm at a conference or a meetup and people ask, hey, what are you into? I'm talking about those things. So it comes through. And so when somebody I actually don't know how, actually, if I step back to that tweet, I don't know how much of that tweet my friend Kim looked at versus she knows what I've done over the years because we've known each other for 10 years. So she knows what I'm known for. So I would say the version of this for you is like, or I would encourage you to think about is like, what do you want to be known for? And it can just start with what are you learning right now? You mentioned, what was it? Machine learning. Yeah, you said machine learning earlier, right? Like that is like my tag, like there's a data tag in my head of like machine learning, this person, right? Also, um, yeah, great. That's great. That's great. Yeah, exactly. Know what those things are. Be thoughtful about that. Make sure it's on your website or in your whatever your social media description is, your bio on X or your tag and your thing and summary on LinkedIn. Give that some thought. Pizza's here. So let's take a quick break and get some food. Thank you all for listening so far. I'll mute this for a moment, anyone online, and we'll be back in a few minutes. We're coming back, friends. We're coming back. Thanks. Great to see you, Martin, Michael, Salim, Jason, Matt. Appreciate you all joining remotely. All right. I've got like a really quick social media lesson. If you don't like social media right now, I understand. Social media, like I think I was talking to Lars yesterday, just today, and he was like, you switched to Blue Sky and you haven't been on because you took a break. And I was like, good for you. There's nothing wrong with that. I have a little tip about how to engage with social media that has definitely also like added up in a really big way. I think my first point here is like, if you make an in-person connection, like somebody you just met today, like get on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's like a really great common denominator for everybody, and you could always find each other elsewhere from there, but like get connected. You meet somebody, you go to a meetup, you go to anything, like get at least one person's LinkedIn, and follow up, say, hey, great to meet you, look at their profile, whatever. But like turn those in-person connections into online connections. Um, Here's how I actually use social media where I get a lot out of it. I maybe spend 5 minutes a day consistently, and it's a positive experience. I'm actually going to jump over to what this looks like on X of all places. Um, I I'm just going to go to I'm going to go to who do I want to go to? I'll go to Scott. So let's say there's this person, Scott Talinsky, and I want to get to know who Scott is. Has anyone heard of Scott Talinsky? I, a few times, yeah, I see some nods. If you haven't heard of him, he's a fantastic podcast show host of Syntax FM with Wes Boss. But let's just say I'm still getting to know Scott. I find out who he is. This is what I do. I click the bell. And I don't agree with clicking the bell for certain things like YouTube and other places, but like if you're on social media, it's Blue Sky X, I forget what it looks like on LinkedIn, but there's a version of it for every platform. I turn on the bell. I do this for everybody I meet. So if anybody wants to connect with me, like let's connect. And I will turn on the bell for every single one of you. And here's how I use it. When I go to X and I want to see what's going on, I just go to my notifications. Now there's stuff in here about replies and all that, but this is the magic card here. It's this new post notifications for Christoph Nakazawa and 8 others. This is the select group of people that I have notifications turned on for. Now, there's two types of people on this list. There are people who I genuinely like have had that bell on for like years, and they don't post so frequently that it's like filling my feed and it's too much. And there's also people that I just met, and it's a combination of the two. And so this is how I basically like get to know anybody I follow is I just turn on those notifications and then I look at this. I do not get push notifications for all their tweets or all their activity. I don't have that. I just when I want to go to social media, I look at this magic card. And when I click on this, it's a micro feed, it's a subset of my whole feed, and it's just the people that I have notifications turned on for. And I really like this because if there's somebody I'm getting to know, I can see their stuff. If it's somebody I want to keep up with, I will reply to them and I'll see stuff on here that I will just reply to because it's somebody I'm keeping up with, somebody I'm friends with. It's a mix of people I'm just getting to know and people that I'm friends with. And this is like my super tactical way of taking this massive platform and just narrowing it down to something that matters to me. So that's, I think, a really magic way to use X or Blue Sky or just whatever you want to be on to look at your feed. I actually got to figure out what this looks like on LinkedIn because there's a lot of good stuff there, and it's very professional. It doesn't have a mix of other things I don't care about, like politics or not always sports. I care about some sports, but yeah. So figure out what this looks like for you. Figure out what it looks what social media looks like for you if you want, and if you skip it, it's okay. Don't feel like you're missing out. But I will say that if I go back to my slide here, I turn on the notifications, I reply to people, and I used to be concerned with like how do I say things where people are going to follow me and all that weird engagement BS. I stopped caring about that. And I will say, if you do try to grow a network on these platforms, LinkedIn aside, it's really weird and really hard. It's I think I've been at like 2,000 followers. That's no flex, but it's just like I've been at 2,000 followers for over a year now. I think for 2 years now, and it's so flat. It's really hard to increase that, and I don't care to grow it, and I'm fine with that. But like just engage with it in the way that makes sense for you. Post your own voice. Don't worry about what other people say. Just be yourself. Link to your personal site, as I said before. One last thing I put here, because it's something I get out of these actually engaging on X, is these, I said before, take your in-person connections and make them online connections. The opposite has happened a lot where there's people I only know online. And actually, if I go over to my feed here, if I go to my profile, there's if I go back to April 23rd, this photo here, I used to only know the person in the middle, Chris Sev. He started a blog called Scotch.io, which DigitalOcean acquired. He's now at Laravel PHP, leading DevRel. I used to only know him online. He's coming to these meetups now, and I know him. Next to him is Lee, and she works on his team. I only know her from online. I met her last week. She's here in Denver. Um, yeah, you're right there behind Chris. Yeah, it's really special when I meet people in person. Wait, I know you, and we've known each other actually for years. We've been like following each other and keeping up with each other's work. Those are really neat things that I've had happen more and more. Just here in Denver, like, and I go to a lot of conferences in the States and Europe, and I meet a lot of people that way too. And it's really cool how like you can make these in-person connections turn them into people you can keep up with it like for years without seeing them again, and vice versa. People that you can meet online and just say, "Hey, I really like that thing you wrote. I really like this episode of Syntax, Scott." And then you end up meeting him because gives lightning talks all the time for Denver Script. That's really great. So yeah, I would say consider social media. That's how I use it. It is optional, but it has added up in a really great way. Um, I think that was like it for structured talks. I'm gonna tell just a couple stories about what else, like how this stuff has sort of played out for me. Does anyone know who this person on the left is? So that's Brendan Ike. Has anyone heard of Brendan Ike? Have you heard of Brendan Ike? Yeah. What did he do? Was I want to make sure I got this right. Um, the founder of JavaScript. He wrote this language called JavaScript. Has anyone heard of JavaScript? Yeah, so I was at this conference. I think this was 2013. This was JSConf US, and I remember the person on the right. I'm actually forgetting his name. Actually, is it on his badge? Cameron. Cameron. I gotta look up Cameron. I was hanging out with Cameron, and one of us was like, "Is that Brendan Ike?" Like, we should go talk to him. I don't know what to say to him. I didn't say anything to him. I literally just sat there starstruck. And I think Cameron gave me his phone. I took a picture of Cameron and Brendan. But I bring this up because I have let me jump ahead. I didn't get to talk to him very much, but there's a bunch of other people. This is a better this is a good version of this. Does anyone know who this is on the left? Mark Erickson. Mark Erickson. So there's this library called Redux, and there's this person called Mark Erickson who maintains it now in Redux Toolkit. And he picked that up from Dan Avramov after being in the community and so forth. And he's done a great job. Mark is a special person. If you haven't, you probably don't recognize him unless you saw one of his recorded talks or went to a conference and met him. But he goes to conferences and he wears his own badge. It's not the conference badge. And it has his Simpsons character, which is his online avatar. And he has his name next to it. And so people like who know him online can, make that connection. Oh, wait, you're Mark Erickson? And Mark Erickson's fantastic because I saw him like 3 times in the last 5 conferences. And I don't think he was speaking I think he only spoke at one of them. He was just there attending. This was at SwiggleConf in Boston. And I brought the person on the right, his name is Sean. Sean has never worked in tech. And Mark is special because he goes to these things just to be there as a resource for people. And there's a lot of people like him, a lot of people like him. But he's a really great example of somebody that just goes to these events and is there to answer questions and there to help and mentor everybody else in the field. And he ended up talking to my friend Sean for like 45 minutes. Sean has never worked in tech. Sean has these very like, how do I get started? Or how do I learn this? And Mark just sat down and spent all this time helping him as much as he could. And there are lots of great people like Mark. I might have it here in another photo. There's another person I have a like really fun story about. I don't have it, but I'll go back to Mark. Sorry. Ryan Carniato wrote this library called Solid.js. And I had no idea who Ryan was. I hadn't seen his streams. He has his amazing streams on YouTube, but I didn't know who he was. But I was in Amsterdam for a conference. I wasn't even speaking in person. I had a recorded talk, but I was welcome in the speaker room. I was like, let me see what the speaker rooms looked like. And I go up there and in walks Ryan and somebody else who I knew was like, hey, Ryan, there you are. You've been here all day, but I'm first seeing you. You finally made it here. Did you get stopped on your way here, like, and you are answering questions and like he's like, yeah. And he's like, and then I saw you like 10, like 20 minutes later, you were 10 feet over answering somebody else's questions. Like, yeah. And basically Ryan had got there at like 9 a.m. and it was noon and he had just gotten to the speaker room to put down his bag. And even I remember Ryan saying, yeah, that's why I'm here. Like to answer questions these people have that use my library or work in tech and just have questions for you. So I definitely get this at meetups. I definitely see this at conferences as well. These people who like maintain the libraries that we use, they're amazing. They're not just like these weird celebrities you can't talk to. They're amazing. They're wonderful people that you can talk to and ask questions. It was actually that same conference in Amsterdam. I remember sitting down with Mark and Ryan, actually. I got to have coffee and pizza with him later on, and Zach Leatherman, who has written 11T. And I was with them because I knew Zach, because I met him at a conference years before he ever wrote 11T. And he had put a talk online for Nebraska JS about how to do public speaking. And it was a really good talk, by the way, because he never said a word. He gave a talk about public speaking where he never spoke. And it was all in his slides and it was all nonverbal. It was really good. And I remember telling him at JSConf US in like 2013 or 14 or 15, one of those years, I love your talk. It's online and I found it and I just thought it was amazing. I didn't see him for like 10 years. And we bump into each other in Amsterdam and he remembered me from me just saying, hey, I really liked your talk. And we ended up having burgers together that night. And then like a couple days later, we were out having pizza with Ryan. And I remember asking when we were over coffee, Mark, I was like behind on Redux. I'm like, hey, what's this Redux toolkit thing you've been talking about? Because I've used Redux and I haven't done anything with Redux toolkit. And they were having this very high level framework library author discussion that I was just riding along, listening, just fly on the wall, enjoying. And Ryan just, sorry, Mark just stopped, like took the conversation there and just, he stopped what they were talking about. And was like, just caught me up for 5 minutes on Redux toolkit and what it's been doing in the last couple of years. And no, like Ryan and Zach were like, yeah, like let's hear it. And that's like what these conversations are like at these events with these people is like you just ask questions, you just be curious. They're wonderful to talk to. And it's like this is not like, oh, look who I know or who I talk to. It's literally like I learned stuff from Mark just asking him about it. And I learned stuff from Ryan just listening to him talk to Zach. And sometimes I'm still at these things not even saying a word, just listening. And when I go to any of these events, I just go up and I see a bunch of people talking and I don't even know if I'm interested in what they're talking about, but I just listen. I just start listening. I just walk up to a group and just start listening. And a couple of minutes later, somebody says, oh, hey, who are you? And I get to say who I am. I never need to say, hey, I'm so and so, and this is what I do. It's always asked of me. So the other, I mean, I have lots of random photos here, but this was in Iceland. The person in the middle there was a colleague from a previous company back in Connecticut. We both worked at Travelers Insurance. That's Paul Grenier. He's done some amazing things in accessibility. He used to work at DQ. We caught up in Iceland, of all places. His wife worked in Iceland. I think she had like some type of grant where she was a university professor or something like that. But we get caught up in Iceland. There's lots of people, lots of friends I've made at meetups, at conferences, just coworkers. Um, This is like a dinner that we just had after a conference in Spain. This is somebody in Berlin. He was one of the volunteers. By the way, if you can't afford a conference ticket or just want to be involved, there's lots of conferences that are looking for volunteers. Unfortunately, not a lot in Denver. We used to have a couple more things. There are a couple things that are around, but it's harder to find a JavaScript conference like Dinosaur.js hasn't happened since 2019. But I will plug one conference that I've been going to every year since 2015 that's happening this year. This is Cascadia JS. This has become my new home conference. Seattle is a flight away, but it's like one of the closer ones besides React Valley, which isn't happening anymore. I guess there's Epic Web that still happens in Utah, and that just happened. And that's likely to continue. But Cascadia JS tickets early bird until May 11th. I have a ticket. I bought a ticket out of my own pocket, which was something else I wanted to touch on. Conference budget right now in the last few years has been non-existent. If you have gotten your company to pay for a conference, that's really great, and it's actually extremely rare right now. And I figured out earlier in my career, actually I think my first two tech conferences I paid for out of pocket. I went to jQuery Boston in 2011. And oh, it's great I mentioned Paul, because I had just that first real job I got was a contract to hire. And I felt like an imposter because they were looking for 5 years expert JavaScript in 2011. There he is, Paul. And contract to hire, I needed to know all this JavaScript. I called the recruiter at Tech Systems and said, hey, I looked at this job rec. You actually sent this to me months ago. And I said, no, it's still a no. I don't know JavaScript. I've copied and pasted code on Stack Overflow. That's all I've done. I'm not an expert. I'm going to just get destroyed in this interview. And I've been on phone interviews where I just get destroyed for 10 minutes and I'm crying at the end of it and I'm glad it's over. And it's going to be that. So you need to cancel this interview. And his name was Thomas. And Thomas said, well, it's okay. Like, just get some practice. It's fine. Like, it's going to be really painful. He's like, don't just tell them you don't know. If they ask you stuff, tell them you don't know the answer. It's okay. I took this phone interview. It was 1 hour of JavaScript trivia. It's like the worst interview format you could have. One of the worst. There's lots of bad interview formats, but a phone interview that's just nothing but JavaScript trivia for an hour where you don't know JavaScript is a recipe for tears. And I went into the call thinking, Thomas is like, it's okay. You're not going to lose our trust. It's like, it's fine. We have a great relationship with them. It's okay if you bomb this interview. Just see what you can learn. Get some experience. I ended up asking questions the whole time. They'd be like, hey, explain a closure. I'm like, I don't know what a closure is. Can you tell me what a closure is? And it's funny, there was a very good interviewer on that call. His name was Mark, and he had pulled up my code, and he found a jQuery plugin that I put in the jQuery registry as a plugin. And he's like, you've written closures, like, or you have a closure in your code. I'm like, I just copy pasted that from Stack Overflow. Can you explain why it needs to be that way? And he told me. So I actually got like free mentorship on this call for this job that I wasn't going to get. And then apparently they cared more that I asked questions and was curious than I actually knew JavaScript. This is 2011. Nobody knew JavaScript. So I ended up at this company, Travelers, in a contract role, totally scared out of my mind, thinking they're going to figure out I don't know JavaScript, which I definitely showed in the interview. The rest of them are going to realize it. But I just kept asking questions, and something happened a month in. I bought it. The people on the team, including Paul, said, hey, some of us are going up to jQuery Boston. It's up in Boston. It's a 2-hour drive. We're buying, our company's paying for it. Just so you know, we're going if you want to join us. So I went and bought a ticket on my own money, stayed at an Airbnb, which was super cheap at the time, not like these days. And I ended up the first night, I think I was at the hotel or I wasn't at the hotel because I couldn't afford the hotel, but I ended up at the hotel where they were. And Paul's like, it's really good that you came up here. Like, you're investing in your career. And it was a really funny thing he said, because it was like, I did this. I don't think about it. I kept doing it from then on, but he's like, it's a really good sign you're here. And I remember him saying that. And it's kind of funny that the next week they made me an offer. They were like, hey, we've heard great things from the team. You're really engaged. You're asking lots of questions. Do you want to start at X? And they offered me, I'll just say that at this point, they offered me 90,000. My previous job at an agency, I was making 60,000. So I got a 50% raise, much better job. People like Paul that I was learning from. um, the whole team was stacked with mentors, people that I had so much to learn from because I went to partly because I almost didn't take an interview and partly because I took it, partly because I asked questions, partly because I went to a conference. All this stuff just adds up in how you just show up and see what happens. And then I get to have a beer with him in Iceland almost 5 years after I worked with him. That was really amazing. Um, there's one other quick story. I was once a director of engineering, and I got that 100% because I organized a meetup. And one of the sponsors of the meetup, the person who hosted it, his name was Javier. He saw how I talked to people and how I engaged with people and how I invited people like Jeff. Hey, Jeff, you should come give a talk. And I was welcoming to people, and he saw the culture I was building in the community. And he said, I want that at our company. So he hired me as a director of engineering for an entirely new department, and I got to hire 3 teams of people and like build the engineering culture from the ground up. That was just from organizing a meetup and just hanging out and being involved. I'm not saying everyone's going to organize a meetup and be that involved, but it's funny what people will know you for and how meaningful that will be. These little engagements where we're just at a meetup talking over pizza. And by the way, I really want people to ask questions in a couple of months. So if you have any, I'll ask you for that. It's funny how that will add up. And and yeah, I have so many stories where like it wasn't like because I know somebody, but it was because I just met and built a relationship with different people over time that I would talk to them and say, hey, I'm looking for something, and or hey, they're looking for something, and it just adds up in a really great way where we end up helping each other. um I've gone on and on. I know I'm rambling, telling random stories, but if there's anything I want to leave you with before questions, it's really keep going to meetups. Don't worry about meeting everybody. Just get to know one person and keep doing that over and over and over again. And be curious, and definitely whatever you can do to help others. What goes around really does come around. I was frankly astonished that 2 people had a conversation about me and made that connection saying, hey, I know who might want to work with Will. And I end up joining a great team that I've been on for a week. I have a great manager who I absolutely believe in. That's the person I was introduced to. That happened. And I'm like, how did they go out of like, how did that happen? And I thought for just a little bit and I realized, wait, I and the people in this conversation that I mentioned talking about, like we've been doing that for each other for years. I've been trying to help other people get hired for years. I've been sharing things that I apply to with other people, saying, hey, I applied to this, you should apply to it too, which is totally not in my best interest. But I'm like, I don't care. I want one of us to get it. Um, just doing what you can to help others, doing what you can to meet others. It really does add up in a great way. And I'm very thankful that you're all here, and that I hope to get to know all of you in different ways as well. So with that, what questions do you have, or do you have a story to share of how you got a job or somebody else you helped?
I'm having an issue now trying to help people
Hmm.
who can't even get their foot in the door.
Oh, you reminded me of something I completely missed, which I wanted to speak to as well. Yeah. Do you have more or question, or just want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and for anybody on the call, like helping younger developers who are trying to get their foot in the door right now. I shared that I got my first roles in 2007, 2008, which is a really rough time. And I had to be really scrappy where I was like basically doing work for free so I could get a job that paid peanuts. And I'm not saying, I hope no one has to go through what I went through, but I know there are people who are doing that. I know there are people who are being scrappy and taking what they can. Um, I want to absolutely acknowledge, like, I feel like right now is even worse. I feel like it's an even worse time because not only is it hard for newcomers, but I think we have more people than ever that are developers. Whether you're paid or not, you're a developer if you're listening to this. And there's a lot of people with lots more experience, with years of experience, who are laid off looking and are looking for months, even years. So somebody who has no experience right now, and if anybody would be so brave, does anybody in that room fall into that? I see 3 hands. It is the is a very difficult time right now. Um, I say that I do think there is hope. I just want to acknowledge like it is extremely difficult right now, but there's always some place that is hiring and that is open to somebody who is not senior level. If you're not aware, most roles are like senior and above. And it's hard even for senior people. It's even harder for mid. The less experience you have, the harder it is right now. Um, I know some people, there's somebody I was talking to last month that's like, yeah, I've been looking since December 2022. And they've been like doing the work and coming to meetups and meeting as many people as they can. And they've been looking since December 22 for their first role. And they're like, I think I'm going to go get a job at Target. And I worked at Target when I was in college. I've done that, and it's hard. It's really hard to say to step back from working on code and doing that. And I remember there's somebody even just a couple years ago that I was friends with. He's like, I think I'm gonna go back to driving trucks. And I wanted to tell him at the time, don't do it. Just hang on. Just keep going. But there's something very real to that, that you need to get by. You need to figure it out. Um, I don't have a lot to offer except I think the market is turning around. I don't think it's big tech that's turning it around. One thing that I'm very hopeful about is it's actually AI. And the thing about AI is there's more people trying to build things from scratch than ever. That includes both developers, including, by the way, the developer I just told that story about, who is considering working at Target, is building a great app. I'm going to need to show it in a moment because it's a really great tool that people should consider using. But developers are building things for themselves and finding that they're able to get further with just their own free time. And there's also a lot of people who are entrepreneurial who are not developers who are like, wait, I can vibe code something and have a sort of a proof of concept. And this is something I can go and like, try to see if I have product market fit. So kind of similar to what happened there was a bit of a home renovation boom that's happened in the US and other countries where home improvement shows came up on the internet. It's kind of a parallel to AI, not the internet, but on TV, like HGTV. And what happened was a lot of homeowners was like, hey, I'm going to try doing that renovation. And they started doing it. And whether they got tired of it or they couldn't finish it, what ended up happening was a subsequent home renovation boom where contractors and home renovators, people who did it professionally, initially their work didn't really change, but at some point, like people got tired of doing it themselves or needed help. And there was this follow-on effect where home renovation picked up and contractors had more business than before. I don't know how that played out over the long term, but I'm hopeful that right now um, the playing field is more level than ever for small businesses. I think the smaller a company, one or two people, is able to do more than ever they could before. And these bigger companies are having the hardest time adapting to the changing, like things changing faster than ever. I'm very pro small business, and I hope that that will shift. And those are the places that they're more likely to be. Hey, I don't have a lot of budget. We have a proof of concept that I vibe coded, or whatever, and I need to start to build out a team which sort of needs to know how to do it. I think there's hopefully opportunity for people who are more junior and people who are experienced to be able to pick that up and run with it. And I do hope there's also the potential for fewer of these monolithic giant apps that don't work that well, and more of these very bespoke solutions, like I don't know, like classic Uber for this, right? I hope more of these micro apps and small solutions that work for this very niche industry because it's cheaper than ever to build those things. I hope more of that happens. Hopefully UX and software actually is better than ever in 5 years because we have more of it than ever. And it's less of these, giant apps that no one likes to use. I'm really glad you brought that up. Because that's really hard right now. And definitely keep coming to these meetups and definitely don't be afraid to share where you're at and what you're learning. I want to add to just a little bit. If you're looking and you're going to meetups and you're learning stuff and you're building something for yourself, even if it's just a to-do app, at some point, like if you keep increasing your skills, at some point that's going to meet where somebody's willing to hire you. And that's where I was for 7 or 8 years. I kept growing my skills and I was unhireable for much of that time. But at some point I built enough of an app that I could show somebody else that they're willing to take a chance on me. and it got me my first part-time job. So that's, don't give up. And, if you need to get another job or whatever to get by, do it. But if you feel like this is something for you, keep at it. Question?
Yeah, so kind of like a double hitter, and especially that hits some, because that's where I'm at right now.
Mhm.
I graduated in May 2023, and I've been looking, putting in applications, and probably every single day, uh, getting close to no cigar, and it's this good. First part is this duality of the roughest part for me, and it's kind of like, it takes so much of my, not even time as much as just energy and brain job hunting, that it's harder and harder every day to actually work on a project, do a project. And even though I do it and I do something, I try my best to do that, it still feels like it's a race that feels like it's going slow, like I'm running, but I'm getting slower and slower every day. It's kind of this diminishing effect. And I just want to, the big thing is like that, how to balance that idea of it's kind of like I have this fuel for passion that I'm having to use just to try to draw on. And my fear of using all the fuel, where then just ending up nowhere. It's like burning through all my passion for coding, and then and then just to try to be able to pay my rent, or try to be able to focus myself and not on the job market or LinkedIn, Monster, and so on and so on.
So anybody on the call, there's a lot, but I'm hearing that you're getting burned out. And that is like, looking for a job is a job. And I actually look back, I took some time off after my last full-time job, which was 2 years ago. And I realized that at any point in my career, I was either working or I was looking for a job. And when I was looking for a job or between jobs, it was just as like, it was even more stressful than anything. It was like the worst time. And I was like, wow, I've never had a break. And I want to acknowledge, like, if you're looking for a job or not working, you're actually, it's much harder to be doing that than anything else. Um, have you realized that you're describing burnout, by the way?
At this stage, the ashes have been put into an incinerator, that have been put into a volcano, that have put into the sun, that is about,
Yeah.
like 6 months from going supernova.
Yeah.
So I understand burnout. It's something I'm trying to manage, because I'm trying to just, and it's kind of what kind of got me to lead it for, is I'm trying to get more experience coding without actually coding.
Mhm.
One of the things I'm trying to do more is to actually go, and this was actually in the Denver Tech Discord, which is actually a really good price on trying more to this, just trying to, even if just putting questions into GitHub and trying to do open problems. That way, for me, and I think because, this is actually gonna go into a second question, but for me, I think I fall more into into the building side and the problem solving side for coding. That's actually what got me into JavaScript, was because my school had never taught it. And then I did my single project, and I was like, oh, hey, I get to make something, I get to see something instead of making a CD list in a terminal. And working on I'm trying to move more into just doing bit comments and doing that kind of work, so that when I do a personal project, it's not for a revenue, it's not for a business to see, it's for myself. And I'm trying to get that separation in my mind. Because it kind of goes into the idea for me of, and this kind of going into the second question, and this is probably not gonna look great on my map, but an interesting thing for me is my biggest passion with computing is in a field that I never want to work in. I like my big passion for coding is game development, but I do not want to take to a desk for Ubisoft or EA.
Yeah.
With, someone with a whip saying you get Assassin's Creed 8 out for 2 days.
Yeah.
So,
I used to want to be in game development too. I know what you're talking about.
so
That 2007 job, by the way, where I was paid $500 a week was is game development. It was terrible.
Probably wasn't 250.
Oh,
That's, find projects that you want to work on, that in. Wherever there's an opportunity for software, like if you're there, you make yourself. That I wanted to be an artist, but then I run into the point when okay, the tool to make that doesn't just let me without lines, Python, lots of that.
So, that's kind of like the weird point I've been, especially after graduation, especially like with all, like my personal life is. My personal life has really taken a backseat to focus on job. And it's really one of those things that I feel like I need to get that stability first.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
have a job to pay my rent, but it's where I need to have that 40% of my brain that's focused on LinkedIn all the time to be unallocated, so I can actually focus on myself. Because at this time, everything really just goes into getting that job
yeah.
so that I can,
You said 2023?
Yeah.
That's 2 years. Yeah, I really gotta say, I think you need to give yourself permission to focus on yourself and give yourself a break.
it's really hard and money is a very
Yeah.
important thing.
I know, yeah,
So I can't, I do stuff like that, I do the best I can, but, you know, I can't do the things that I love or focus, because that kind of like eats at the end of my head. And it's kind of like a worm, that just keeps everyone's like, you know, I can go out and do something, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna have to get back on LinkedIn. I'm gonna do something, but at the end of the day, I have to do this.
yeah,
And those taking personal time, that takes up time that I could study or do things and just get out of this kind of like circle. And not circle, but like kind of like the job market, that way I can focus on, you know, not having to worry about, you know, something, being able to actually afford my cash going to the vet or paying off my dad's funeral bills and focusing on stuff like that instead of hoping that my worrying that because my job doesn't pay holidays, if I'm gonna be having water soup or ramen at night.
yeah. That's really hard. You're describing a situation I've heard a lot of people say, that are in a similar situation. You know, my friend that graduated in December 2022, very similar. And I'd like to talk to you some more afterwards. I don't have anything, like I can't share too. There's not a lot I can say right now, but there's something you said. Oh, okay, I'll come back. You said something about working on problems that you have that's hopefully fulfilling in other ways, like it's scratching an itch and such. Real quick for myself, my favorite side projects are building tools for video games. I do that in my free time, like nothing that I've actually published or shared, but I really should like polish a little more because people that play certain games could use them. I just end up building them for myself, and it's a fun way I end up doing things. Somebody else who did that, there's this person applying to lots of jobs and tailoring their resume to everything over and over and over again. And they built this tool called ResUme. So it's res-u-me.com. I'll share it in the React Denver Discord when I get a chance, or somebody else can share it if they're listening. This is I actually didn't use this, but I did the opposite of using it. I did this manually with ChatGPT. I would take my resume and I would take a job description. And I would say, hey, reconcile these two. What should be in my resume that is not in my resume, or like, how can I craft my resume towards this job description? And of course, AI made up a bunch of things I didn't do, but it occasionally like reframed things in a better way, and it reworded things or took two bullet points and made it one, or reprioritized things. I did that very manually and it was very painful. And this is built by my friend Michael, and it's really good. It's free right now. You can buy him coffee if you are able to, but he built this tool that doesn't just use AI to generate what your thing should be. It actually has it's a bit of a tool, like with a feedback loop where you write a thing and it gives you these writing checkpoints of whether you are meeting, if you have clarity, if you're describing outcome and action, like it's got these 4 criteria. So it's actually a bit of a writing training tool, which I thought was really cool. Michael didn't just want to get a job, he wanted to get better at communicating, and he built that into his tool, which I thought was absolutely brilliant because I think that helps everybody. And yes, it's using AI to figure some things out. And of course, it can generate a resume. And there's actually this really great WYSIWYG aspect where you can like reprioritize things and get the preview of your resume and do things with it and version your resume for different roles and types of jobs you could be going after. I share this because it's a great example of somebody building something, increasing their skills, and potentially having a product that they can make money on. And it helps everybody that's looking for a job. So it's a really fantastic thing that I felt really compelled to share. So this is Resume. So Michael, if you're listening, yeah, it's really, really well done. And I hope more people will try it if you're looking. And if I apply to another thing, I'm definitely using it. What were you thinking about?
To kind of elaborate, this is going off of the whole entry level problem, which is the disk usage of the job, disk usage 100% error of the job market going on right now.
You said disk usage 100%?
Just because it's a problem that there's no clear, when you see 100% disk usage, you're like, well, there's like 87 problems this could be.
Yeah.
But kind of going into where I went about talking about game dev being my passion. What about, what would you say in that situation where, kind of like what, for the side projects I want to be doing and will have more passion for, aren't really going to be in the market of where I want to apply to work.
I think it's fine. I don't think it hurts you. So the question was like, if your side project has nothing to do with what you want to get a job in, is that okay? Or like what? I think I actually think it helps you. I mean, it helps you as much as maybe, I don't think it hurts you. And yeah, you're maybe like leaving something on the table. Jason, please.
Yeah, just a direct comment. I went to school for engineering. I never did that. And like what I used to think was like I went to school to learn how to teach myself things. So to like respond to like, what if it's not related? It proves that you can like figure out and like break it down and solve it, you get action done.
Yeah.
This is useful.
There will be roles where like they care that you know React and TypeScript and they actually care. Like that's all they care about. And they're not great. But there's a lot of people, a lot of us here that were like, I just want somebody on my team that's gonna learn and ask questions and be somebody I can trust. And they're gonna learn. They're gonna learn. I have a really great person I worked with. His name is Nicholas. And I remember him telling his manager at one point, can we just please hire entry level? Because it's easier for me to teach somebody who's entry level, who has none of this baggage and set way of doing things, than somebody who's coming in with years of experience and is very rigid. And I'm not saying if you have years of experience like me, it's like, it's not necessarily everybody, but he was just saying there's an advantage to knowing nothing. On the same, I actually joined Nicholas's team, and I was talking to our director at the time, and he's like, "Hey, what do you think the team needs to do right now?" And I knew the answer immediately. It was like, "We need to hire somebody junior." He's like, "What do you mean? Why do we need to hire somebody junior?" And I had a very compelling business case. We were writing a library. It was a design system, code for other developers to use. And I said, everybody building this is super senior. I was like one of the most junior people, and I had like 15 years of experience. Like everyone is so senior that we don't know what we don't know. Like no one's asking like lower level, like I'm new to this questions. Our next hire was somebody, I think with like 3 or 4 years of experience, was actually really qualified. But they came in and they had lots of questions. Like, I don't understand this. I don't understand that. There's like, that's a gift to add to a team. And it made what we were creating better. And I think this applies not just to code that's written for other, like the customers, developers, it applies to everything. A lot of people overlook that. How are we going to have senior engineers in 10 years if you're not hiring any juniors right now? For what it's worth, there's a lot more people getting a lot more vocal about that right now. If anyone's heard of Primogen, I think he talks about it. There's a lot of people who have like a voice in the industry, who have lots of followers and streams and things like that and channels, and they're getting really loud. Like enough is enough. We can't be interviewing the way we were interviewing. We can't be shirking people who have less experience than us. Like, where do you draw that line? You might have 5 years of experience. At some point, it's like, wait, are we only hiring 6 or more years of experience? It's just going to keep going up and up. It's got to go back down to being normal again. There's something else I didn't cover that I think is really important that I want to speak to, which is I found out a month ago that potentially most, anecdotally, they were saying most job applications are not real people. And I used to think, oh, like if you can just click a button on LinkedIn, it's just easy to apply. So something has 10,000 applications. So it's just a lot of low level applications, people who don't know JavaScript at all applying for it because they know PHP or whatever, and vice versa. And it turns out that right now in the age of AI, there's actually a ton of spam applications, like literally spam applications. And it's actually an attack vector for some companies where they're actually trying to get into the interview process. And sometimes there's a story that just this week I've heard about that it was for an adversary that was in an interview, and I forget which company it was, because they're really cool. I wish I could remember. They actually did the interviews because they wanted to learn more about how to identify these bad actors. So that's this is wild to say, but if you're applying to a job, you're actually competing with a lot of not real people. And those resumes that they're applying with are generated with AI to perfectly match those job descriptions. It's not fair. So there's a lot of recruiters, and for as much flack as some recruiters get for a lot of things, recruiters are getting destroyed right now with tons of applications that they don't know how to sift through. And how do you tell apart who's human? Their job is really difficult right now. And to shortcut that, I do have a really good tactic for this. And it's definitely everybody can use it. Everybody can use it. Even with no experience, you can use it. It's if you can get a referral, get a referral. There's more to this. It's not just the overcome the spam bot, but here's how referrals work. There's two things I think people should know about it. First is if you get a referral, one, the person who's referring you has an incentive. If you get hired, not always, often they will get a bonus. And I have made as much as $10,000 in a year getting people referred. Thank you, Jason. And like there's a very real financial incentive for people to refer. The second thing is a referral doesn't get you the job, never gets you the job, but it hopefully gets you the interview. Doesn't always get you the interview. I got referred to a really great role that I was really excited about. Never heard back. They had layoffs. Nobody heard back. I don't think. But it doesn't always get you the job, but it hopefully gets you the interview and it gets you past that spam filter. From there, it's up to you to get it. And if you're not qualified or you're not a good fit for the team, you're not going to get it. But getting referrals is really important. How do you get referrals? If you don't know anybody, find who you can. I would say this. I didn't cold apply to anything. I haven't cold applied to anything in over a decade at least. I think the last time I cold applied was that Tech System Stories in 2011, where that was like I was getting help from them, but I was like me cold applying. And since then, everything has been a referral. It's always been hey, who do I know and what do they have? And now it's at the point where I know enough people where I can go looking, and if I find something interesting, I probably know somebody or I can ask for an introduction, which anybody can also do. LinkedIn could be a little bit better about this, but if you go to a company and you might see who you might know there, and that is something to look for. And just be honest. Like I'm looking for something. Do you know if anyone's hiring at your company? That is one way to go about it. Definitely listen to who's hiring whenever that comes up. That gets shared very little at meetups, or you get totally swamped by people. Something else that I remember happening was when I was still at my previous full-time job company. It was Workday. Somebody had applied there and they were not hearing back. And I bumped into him in a meetup. He's like, "Oh, you work at Workday? I applied there actually. I haven't heard back." And I was like, "Oh, really?" So I talked to them. What ended up happening was like, this person's asking questions. They're asking for help. I want to help them. I don't know if they're qualified, but I went back to work. I ended up talking to a different hiring manager that was also hiring. His name was Jason. And Jason said, "Oh, who's this person that applied? Maybe we'll look at them." He ends up hiring them. This person was not qualified for the role they applied for, and they ended up getting hired for a different team. And it was because they just talked to somebody at the company, that they bumped into in person. That absolutely happens a lot. And people always want to help each other. Just like, I want to help you. Everybody here wants to help each other. Like it adds up at some point. And it's hard. Like when I went looking, it was hard for me to ask for help. But there was people that I wanted to work with again. I literally messaged them, say, "Hey, Steve, I need your help." I actually learned that from Simon Sinek. Like it's actually it's a way to be vulnerable and to get to just show that you show what you want in a very just honest way. And I straight up told people, I want your help. I need your help. And is anybody hiring at your company? I'd love to work with you again. Or if you've heard of anything. And I only reached out to like 5 or 6 people, and I had maybe, I don't know, 100 people I might have reached out to, but I just started with a few people and I did that each day. So if you're cold applying to things every day, think about shifting that strategy as much as you can to reaching out to people as directly as possible, and making more friends as much as possible, making more connections and all that. People want to help each other. So that is my strategy now. And if I go back to even tech systems, I mentioned that was cold. That wasn't cold, actually. I knew tech systems because a friend of mine, Kareem, had a great reputation with them. He had become a highly paid engineer in just a few years working at tech systems, and they knew him. They're like, "Oh, you're Kareem's friend? Like, wherever you are, we're going to help you." And they helped me. And they said, "Hey, you can take an interview and totally get destroyed in it, and it doesn't bother us." So yeah. So think about, definitely keep cold applying, but try to shift as much effort as you can to being direct with people, asking for help, going and stalking people on LinkedIn and stalking companies and finding things like that. Places are hiring. I don't think it's the big tech companies. And I think one thing specific to Denver is we have a lot of tech, and that actually hurts us right now because a lot of these same tech companies have laid people off. So Denver's hurting more than a lot of other places. By the way, the job I got was remote, and there's a lot of small places that are seeing the future being remote, and they don't want to pay for office space. So that I think bodes well to be able to work anywhere. Granted, I think early in my career, I did really well to work in person. So there's a trade-off. So I know I've been talking a lot, and I know other people have questions and thoughts and other things to offer each other. So I'm going to close it here, and we can talk casually after this. I'm going to check while you all get up. I'm going to just look at the chat on Zoom for anyone there. And I want to say thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for listening. And I hope in some way this was helpful to each of you.
It was a great talk, Will. Thank you for it.
Thanks, man. Sorry I sort of neglected you all, and there's a lot of talk in the room that you probably couldn't hear, but thank you.
Yes, sir.
We're talking, I think plays tenor sax or tenor.
By the way, if you ever attend remotely, make sure you talk to each other in chat. I remember during the pandemic, I met a lot of people on chat and Zoom. So you all should know each other and share your LinkedIn's because it's easy for you to do on chat, or drop it in the Discord. We should have a networking channel and just drop stuff like that.
Thanks for coming, Matt.
All right.
All right, I'm gonna kill the recording, so bye. Have a good one.